I'd like to open this meeting, the Camarillo City Council. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Kilby?
Here.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo?
Here.
Councilmember Tennyson?
Present.
Vice Mayor Tremblay? Here. And Mayor Santangelo.
Here. Okay, the purpose for opening at 4 p.m. is to go into closed session. I'll have the city attorney read the closed session item, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. We have two items listed on the agenda for conference with legal counsel and anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4, two potential matters. And for the record, Councilmember Kilby will not be participating in one of the matters due to a conflict. And if there's any reportable action, I will make that at the end of the regular City Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, and with that, we will recess to closed session.
I'd like to call the Camarillo Sanitary District regular meeting for March 8th to order, please, and let the record reflect that all directors are present. I'm going to go down to the flag salute, and I'm going to ask Mr. Tremblay if he'd lead us tonight in the flag salute.
Would you please join me in our flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the agenda will be approved as submitted. We've got public comments for the Camarillo Sand District. Any public that would like to make a comment tonight? Seeing nobody come forward. That gets us down to the consent calendar.
Move consent.
There's a motion and a second. Consent, any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. That passes unanimously. Item C, we're going to wait a little bit. We're going to discuss that with the regular Camarillo City Council when that comes up on that agenda. However, we're going to get down to any oral communications or anything from any directors tonight. Hearing none, we will recess until further notice.
Turn my mic on and reconvene the meeting of the Camarillo City Council. Let the record reflect that all council members are present. And that brings us to our presentations. So this month is American Red Cross Month. Throughout the month of March, we honor individuals who make the life-saving mission of the American Red Cross possible. The American Red Cross works tirelessly through its volunteers to support communities when disaster strikes. They provide 24-hour support and should be recognized for their compassion and humanitarianism. It's an honor to present a proclamation tonight celebrating the American Red Cross Month and honoring the generosity of Red Cross volunteers and donors. I'd like to invite up members from the local Red Cross chapter, if they're here, to accept the proclamation and say a few words. Hannah Wurst, from the Ventura County Board President, and Ken Bauer, who's a Ventura County Board member. I'm not sure if anybody is here. Okay, so we will hold on to this and make sure that they get that. Okay, and with that, we will move on to oral communications. I'm going to start on my right this time. Councilmember Kildee, would you like to go first?
All right, let me get my stuff together here for a minute. Okay, meetings attended. March 3rd, had a VCTC. Wait a minute, that's not me. Hang on here. No, I didn't do that. Economic, yes, okay. February 23rd, the Economic Development and Land Use, I attended that. And that's all. Oh, today, actually, we had the groundbreaking with all of my colleagues here, make a Miracle League be a new baseball facility for individuals in the community that's sorely needed. So that was really great. I know the mayor will have some more comments on that. She's been involved in this practically since day one, if not day one. So that's going to be a really great, addition to our city. Also met in the liaison committee with the Pleasant Valley Recreation Park District with Council Member Tremblay as well. So with that, St. Patrick's Day is coming pretty quick here, so make sure everybody wears green. So with that, that's all I have tonight.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Meetings attended February 23, Ventura County Transportation Commission, the planning meeting for strategic planning. On February 24, I had a board meeting of the Metrolink Board of Directors in Los Angeles. From February 26 to March 1 in Washington, D.C., the CASA Federal Policy Forum and meeting with federal agencies and legislators and staff, and I'll cover that in just a minute. March 2, a Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District ad hoc meeting with Councilmember Kildee. On March 3, the Ventura County Transportation Commission actual commission meeting with the workshop. And then today, the Miracle League of the 805 groundbreaking, which all of the council members were present at, and I really want to pay tribute. It's been a long-standing effort by all those volunteers. And I want to salute Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District for all of the work that they've done to make that happen. As far as the CASA conference in Washington, D.C. is concerned, together with our mayor and several staff, we attended panels on a variety of topics. I think the most important were the current congressional priorities in 3 specific areas, and they are directly relevant to what our city is looking at in terms of ultimately rehabilitation of our water reclamation plant. First is on permitting reform and extending the terms of our permits from 5 years to 10 years. Hopefully that is a congressional priority this year. Secondly, with respect to PFAS litigation, we've all heard about PFAS, polyfluoroalkyl substances, to say the whole chemical name, and the issues that bodes for us in terms of wastewater discharge. And also finally, oversight on implementation of the new infrastructure laws, the BIL law and the IRA laws passed by Congress. Secondly, Clean Water Act and funding opportunities. We heard about that. And thirdly, we heard from agency staff from the Department of Energy and EPA and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation on infrastructure funding, the new infrastructure funding laws. With meetings with agencies together with the mayor and several staff, it was a team effort. We met with staff from EPA, Department of Energy, the United States Bureau of Reclamation, staff from Senators Padilla and Feinstein's office, and then we met personally with Congresswoman Brownlee. We really talked in those meetings about the city efforts on our sustainability master plan and our climate action plan, of which we are very proud. We know that staff has been working very hard on that. And we talked about specific infrastructure projects, and particularly in water and treated wastewater and energy, et cetera. So very intensive couple of days, several days, and a lot of meetings. So anyway, that's the report. Thanks.
Okay. For meetings attended, on February 27th, I attended the CSUCI Site Authority, of which I am an alternate of, and I did request to sit on their Finance Audit Committee as well. February 26th, I attended ADL's Anti-Defamation League's Walk Against Hate. Councilmember Tennyson joined me as well. It was a wonderful event of over 400 people, many community organizations from the Reagan Library to Diversity Collective, and many others were there, along with the sheriffs, district attorney, and many community leaders. February 27th, I attended a pillar dedication at TO Arts to former Mayor Claudia Abel de la Peña, who has served the city of Thousand Oaks for over 20 years. February 28th, I attended the Camarillo Academic Olympics session here. It was really cute to see all of the children sitting in our chairs. I just really wanted to thank all of the volunteers that made that happen as well, and congrats to all of the children moving forward. March 4th, I attended the ribbon cutting for Culichi Town, which is the new Sinaloan Mexican-based restaurant in town. Their menu looked amazing, so I definitely have to go back. And then March 4th, also on that Saturday, Mayor Santangelo and I, and we were also at the ribbon cutting, but we also attended and participated at the Camarillo Library's Women at Work panel. And we were joined by really other wonderful women, Alice Foy, founder of Digital Jane, Rachel Leon, director of Kimball Ranches, and it was just an overall wonderful experience. March 6th, I met with the director of Edison, Andrew Thomas. March 8th, actually today, I attended the Sheriff's Foundation State of Law Enforcement breakfast with Sheriff Freihoff, and as well as with my other council members, we attended the groundbreaking of the Miracle League.
I feel like I need to work harder. February 25th, I attended the CB birthday celebration at the CB Museum in Port Hueneme. I've heard of the museum. As a former military person, you'd think I'd have gone there before, but it is really an impressive museum, and if you haven't been there, I strongly urge you to go to the museum. On February 26th, along with Councilmember Martinez Bravo, I did the ADL walk. March 2nd, I attended RDP 21. Also on March 2nd, I had a briefing and a tour at Callegas. Again, another very interesting, informative, and learning experience for me. On March 2nd, I attended the AWA board meeting, and that's the Association of Water Agencies. On March 6th, I also met with Mr. Thomas from Southern California Edison. And I'd just like to remind everybody, a week from this Saturday and Sunday, the Point Mugu Air Show is going to be occurring. They estimate between 80 and 100,000 attendees a day, so leave early and plan on getting home late. It'll be the first time in the history of the air show at Mugu that both demonstration flight groups, the Blue Angels and the Air Force one, Thunderbirds, are flying in Mugu, and only the third time they've ever performed together at an air show.
Okay, thank you. For meetings attended, February 23rd, the Economic Development and Land Use Committee. On March 2nd, CPA Board of Directors. I was also in DC from February 26th until March 1st, and Mr. Tremblay did a great job of describing what we did while we were there. On March 4th, I attended the Caliche Town Restaurant ribbon cutting, and the menu does look fantastic. This is the restaurant where Brendan's used to be. And on March 4th, I was also at the Women at Work panel for Women's History Month at Camarillo Library. And then this morning, I was at the Miracle League groundbreaking of Friendship Field, and I've been watching as they've been working on this project, because they're dear friends of mine, friends that I've had since I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And it's really cool to see your friends grow up and to see us now in our community giving back to our community. And it took a lot of hard work for them, and so I'm really proud of them and really excited for them and for our community. I wanted to spend a few minutes tonight talking about CPA, Clean Power Alliance, and this is who we get our electricity from, if you haven't opted out. I'm just going to read my notes here. So the CPA board at our last meeting approved an interim rate increase that will take effect in April of 2023 and continue through June. Ordinarily, we have tried to only adjust our rates once a year, but because of the extreme heat events through the past summer and the recent energy market volatility, we've had to make an adjustment, and so we've decided to make this interim rate increase. Each of CPA's 3 rate options will remain less expensive than Southern California Edison's base rate for residential customers. So if you probably aren't following this, but in January, Edison raised their rates because, again, they've undercollected in the previous year. So they raised their rates. They lowered the PCIA. If any of you have been paying attention to this electricity stuff, you'll understand that the PCIA is that legacy charge. It's what even CPA customers are charged for what they put into the infrastructure of delivering electricity. But the PCIA actually dropped for us ridiculously low. So what that amounted to is, even without us making any changes, we were 12 to 15% lower in rates than Edison. So even with our rate adjustment now, we will still be below the base rate for Southern California Edison. Each of the 3 rate options deliver a higher percentage of renewable energy content than Edison's base rate. And as always, CPA customers always have the choice to change their rate option. Even though we as a city default into the 100% level, anybody can switch down into the lower levels or completely opt out if they choose to. And CPA also offers programs to assist customers with paying their bill, and customers on low-income rates will continue to see substantial savings through CPA. We will be doing our annual rate adjustment, and we will be looking at that in the coming months. But it's still looking like even with another rate adjustment, we will still be below what Edison is charging. I believe in April that Edison is even increasing rates again. So that's where we stand. For the council members, I handed out something for you, so you have like the talking points, which really summarizes the situation. And I also included for you the PowerPoint presentation that the CPA staff put together for how we came to the decision as to which option rate to choose from. So that's all I have. Okay, so that brings us down to the consent calendar.
Second.
A motion and a second.
And I don't want to pull any items, but I just had a comment. I can do it after? Or do you want me to do it now?
if you'd like,
Okay.
sure.
I just had a question for item F for the C-Click software renewal. I just wanted to ask, I know that in the first year, 21, 22, the fee was about $24,000, and then it jumps to an estimated close to $44,000 in 24, 25. And I just wanted to understand that, like, why is there such a, large increase?
Certainly. So in that first year, when we agreed, the agreement was just for that first year, and they offered us an incentive and a discount for that time because they knew that we weren't sure if it was actually going to work out for us. We were looking for it to replace our work order system and a number of other things. So they did provide a discount for that first year, and we knew that the subsequent years then would follow with their normal pricing and would return back to, like, the second year here, ending in 23 is $38,732, and then from then on would escalate at their standard 5%. So
Okay.
that would account for the lower first-year cost.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Oh, they're here? Oh, good. Okay, so we're going to back up and we're going to do this presentation again, now that you're here. It's American Red Cross Month. Actually, why don't you come on up? I'm going to read this again.
I'm sorry, I thought it was 5:30.
It's fine, you're fine. All right, it is American Red Cross Month. Throughout the month of March, we honor individuals who make the life-saving mission of the American Red Cross possible. The American Red Cross works tirelessly through its volunteers to support communities when disaster strikes. They provide 24-hour support and should be recognized for their compassion and humanitarianism. It's an honor to present a proclamation tonight celebrating the American Red Cross Month and honoring the generosity of Red Cross volunteers and donors. I'd like to invite up, you're already here.
Thank you.
Would you like to say something before the pictures?
Just a couple of things. I think most of you know what the Red Cross does, disaster recovery, disaster planning, first aid training, and all that. The big thing that Camarillo has going for us is we do the Ride for the Red every year. And we had over 200 riders this past year. They raised $74,000 for the Red Cross. So we really appreciate any of you who are bike riders. November 4th is our ride coming up this year that we're already planning for, and we appreciate any of your support. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to say was there's a 90-90 rule, and many of you may have heard that. I know Hannah has heard it, but just to keep in the front of your mind, 90% of all Red Cross people you see are volunteers. We only have 22 paid staff in an entire region that goes from here to San Luis Obispo to Bakersfield and Fresno. So 90% of the people are volunteers. When you see shelters being staged, they're all volunteers. And the most important thing for all of you out there is 90% of every dollar you donate goes to provide services. Again, small staff, very low. I mean, we have a regional headquarters right here in Camarillo over on Plano Road, 836 Plano. And it's just an industrial park, and it's a small building, and it was donated. So we appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Hannah? Okay, okay. Now we pose for the picture.
Can you do one more? I'll post this tonight before you can get out of here. Thank you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, that brings us to item L, which is the cooperative agreement with Jamboree Housing Corporation, Home Key 3.0.
And yes, Mayor and Council, real quick, I just wanted to have on the record that Councilmember Kildee did receive an opinion from the FPPC that he does have a conflict related to his business, and so he will be stepping down just for this item. Thank you.
Alonso Ramirez, go right ahead.
Great. Hello. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of Council. On January 11, 2023, the City Council approved the submission of a letter of interest to the County of Ventura to explore a potential partnership for our HomeKey 3.0 application to build permanent, supportive, and bridge housing in the City of Camarillo. An evaluation team comprised of subject matter experts is currently reviewing all the letters of interest received, and the staff recommendation will be taken to the Ventura County Board of Supervisors on March 14, 2023. To complete this project, the City of Camarillo, and if approved, the County of Ventura, will need to partner with a developer and operator to assist in the acquisition, rehabilitation, and operations of the permanent, supportive, and bridge housing. To this end, on January 12, 2023, staff released a request for proposal for HomeKey application partnership, property acquisition, management rehabilitation, homeless services, and housing administration. The deadline to receive the submissions was February 9, 2023, and the city received 4 proposals as outlined in the agenda report. A preliminary evaluation was conducted, and the staff recommended interviewing 3 of the 4 firms that submitted proposals as specific to the City of Camarillo. After reviewing all 3 firms, the evaluation team recommended that Jamboree Housing Corporation be selected to enter into a cooperating agreement for a HomeKey application. Jamboree is a nonprofit housing development company that develops, acquires, renovates, and manages permanently affordable rental and ownership housing. The evaluation team believes Jamboree is the best fit for this particular project, as they are highly experienced in not only developing permanent supportive housing, but have also been successful in receiving approvals from the state in every HomeKey application they have submitted. Additionally, Jamboree was one of the few firms with experience in bridge housing, also known as transitional or interim, as part of the permanent supportive housing facility. Jamboree Housing Corporation was successfully awarded funding for 3 applications in HomeKey Round 1, receiving the second largest award in that round. During Round 2, Jamboree Housing Corporation successfully secured funding for another 3 applications. Between both rounds, their projects have received a total of approximately $95 million. Among the tasks Jamboree Housing Corporation will perform, they will identify a motel site for acquisition, determine the financial feasibility of the motel conversion, identify and obtain other funding sources for the project, assist in applying for a home key application and other necessary project financing, develop a timeline including project milestones, prepare to carry out the renovation, own, manage, and operate the property, and provide the wraparound services necessary. So when the County of Ventura reached out to the City of Camarillo regarding a potential partnership last year, they actually mentioned a property owner who was interested in selling a motel for purposes of rehabilitating it into permanent supportive housing. So the city was put in contact with the representative of the property owner, and we've been discussing a potential acquisition for a home key project. The location in question is 165 East Daly Drive in Camarillo. As of now, staff has selected this site, and together with Jamboree Housing Corporation, we'll be doing the necessary due diligence to verify that the site is suitable for this project. Should council approve the contract with Jamboree tonight, the next step will be to wait for the County of Ventura to approve the city's letter of interest next Tuesday. If selected by the county, tonight's contract will need to be amended to include the county as a third co-applicant, and after all approvals are executed, the three entities will work on a home key application to be provided to the California Department of Housing and Community Development next month. Additionally, city staff, together with Jamboree Corporation, will conduct the necessary stakeholder outreach to communicate with Camarillo residents and business owners about the project. Staff in both organizations are already working together to develop web content to both websites to educate the public on the projects and answer any question they may have. So any residents or business owners can visit thecityofcamarillo.org /homelessness to learn more about the city's short-term and long-term goals to address this topic. At the appropriate time, we will also be holding individual and group meetings, including public forums, to give the community the opportunity to learn more about the initiatives and ask any questions. So, the staff recommendation today is for City Council to adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute agreement number 2023-15 to cooperate with Jamboree Housing Corporation in a home key application. Authorize the city manager to take all necessary actions for a home key project and determine that entering into the agreement and approving the resolution is exempt from CEQA under the common sense exemption. So now this concludes the staff presentation. However, we do have representatives from Jamboree Housing Corporation here with us tonight who will be doing a brief presentation, and we will all be available for questions afterwards.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Michael Massey. I'm the Chief Development Officer for Jamboree. I'm also accompanied tonight by our Chief Impact Officer, George Searcy, and Roger Kinoshita, who's our Vice President of Acquisitions and runs our business development team. I'm thrilled to take a few minutes of your time this evening to introduce you to Jamboree and some of the work that we've done. We've really enjoyed the introduction that we've had to your city through staff. They did take an opportunity to come down and visit a number of our sites in Orange County, and so we were really happy to kind of get to know folks and think that we've got the beginnings of a very strong relationship. So we're eager to move forward on this project and get to know more about your city, and I want to introduce you a little bit to Jamboree. Jamboree is a nonprofit 501c3 affordable housing developer. We're very fully integrated. By that, I mean that we, in addition to the development, we also run services, the asset management, and construction of our developments. We are located, our headquarters is in Irvine, California. We also have an office in Sacramento, representation in the Bay Area, and San Diego as well. Excuse me. We've been around since about 1990, so we've been doing this for the past 30 years. I'm going to talk a lot about the real estate tonight, but I don't want to drift too far away from mission, because mission is very, very important to what Jamboree does, and we state it very plainly. This is something that it isn't just words on a piece of paper or on a PowerPoint slide. This is something we talk about every day. It makes an impact in the decisions we make and the projects that we pursue, but we want to deliver high quality, affordable housing and meaningful services that can transform lives and strengthen communities. It's a very important part of what we do. And our vision through that mission is that every Californian, we hope that every Californian can live in a strong, healthy, and sustainable community. It's something that we want and we pursue in all it is that we do. So like I said, that mission is very, very important, but we also recognize that what we do is large, impactful, and quite frankly, capital intensive. So we take everything that we do very, very seriously. We have built a portfolio that if it were a market rate portfolio, it would be worth over $3 billion. That's how active we've been. So what does that look like in terms of people? So in our more than 10,000 units throughout the state of California, more than 20,000 Californians call a Jamboree development their home. Among those is more than 800 veterans, including 75 in our Veterans Village called Heroes Landing in Santa Ana, which opened 2 years ago. And 3,600 seniors. Throughout Jamboree's history, the main thrust of our portfolio has been workforce housing for families that are lower income, that are part of the workforce, that and seniors. So between those two, the families is about 2/3 of our portfolio, about 1/3 is our seniors. Over the past decade or so, we've made a strong push into permanent supportive housing, or housing for people with special needs. And that's a very unique and strong fit for us, because in addition to our strong experience in developing, owning, operating, and designing and building real estate, the services has always been a very, very important part of what Jamboree does. We do it a little bit differently than a lot of our peers do. It's the first thing that we pay for as we start looking at a development. How do we pay for the services? And we make it so that there is no need for ongoing subsidy or ongoing philanthropy. We build it in as part of just like we do the utilities and the trash collection and property taxes. It's in our performance from the very, very beginning. Because of that commitment to services, we've been able to build a real infrastructure. Of Jamboree's 140 employees, roughly half are involved in the deployment of services and provision of services on our properties throughout the state. So special needs represents a big part of what we do, particularly currently, as there's amidst the housing crisis and homelessness crisis, there's a strong emphasis from the public sector to invest in solutions to homelessness. And we've made a strong stride in our work to do that, addressing homeless residents with mental illness, veterans, and folks with other disabilities, and transition-age youth is also a population that we've been serving of late. I want to talk specifically about hotel conversions. I spent a lot of time talking about hotel conversions. In all candor, the Home Key program, which was established by the state of California, is a really ingenious idea, and we think it's an ingenious idea because we came up with it first. The idea is, with a large amount of funding that was available from the federal government in response to COVID, California decided to say one of the important things is to get folks off the street, and let's provide shelter for them to get through the pandemic. And it was a great idea, and in my mind, a great use of those federal funds. However, they went a step further and said they were going to prioritize those projects that can evolve from the room key model, the model where you're providing shelter, to ultimately, as the pandemic fades away, permanent supportive housing. And we like this as an idea, as I said, because we've been doing this for quite some time. We've always thought that motels and hotels were a way to quickly get units online. You oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes avoid an entitlement issue in moving forward. Obviously, the building is already built, so you only have to rehab it, not build it, although we've found that sometimes there's a lot more to that than the new construction. But nonetheless, we've been able to get a number of units online on permanent supportive housing from start to people moving in within 2 years on a regular basis. We did 3 of these prior to the Home Key program being introduced. So when Home Key became available, we were teed up and ready to go. And as Alonzo mentioned in the introduction, that we've now been successful in 7 of those, and we've gained a tremendous amount of experience through that process. It's a very unique product. We thought we were ready for it. It took us 4 or 5 to really be comfortable with that, but now that we've done a number of them, we feel we are the subject matter experts within the state of California. So 7 home key projects, which are in the midst of development. We do have 3 we have 1 that is in its permanent phase, so it's already evolved from transition to permanent. We have 2 more that served as shelter for 2 years, and then we went back for funding for a larger capital investment through the tax credit program, and now we're rehabbing those. We'll have folks moving in there on a permanent basis in July. So it's perfect models of what the Home Key program was designed to do. Provide shelter during the pandemic, and after that, you still are able to use that investment and leverage it to develop permanent supportive housing. I talked a lot about services, and I'm happy to answer a lot of questions, and more importantly, George Searcy, our Chief Impact Officer, can answer a lot of questions. But when it comes to services, particularly with permanent supportive housing, the services are vital to what it is that we do. Fortunately, once you have folks in an affordable unit, you have them stabilized. It's a perfect platform for the delivery of services. So which services are we delivering? And it depends. Because we tailor our services to be responsive to the population and what their needs are. In some cases, as I mentioned in our veterans development in Santa Ana, there are particular service-related services that we provide and partner with the appropriate service providers to make sure that those veterans' needs are met. If we're talking about people with a mental illness or people that have been homeless for a long time or a short time, whether it's economic training, whether it's access to medical services, we provide what it is that they need. We provide full wraparound services to be responsive to these residents. Really, it is a whatever it takes philosophy. The important thing to know, though, is when we talk about whatever it takes, and I talked about the fact that half of Jamboree employees are involved in the provision of services, that's an important model for us to do that. It's not always the best. Sometimes there's a local provider that is able to provide those services, and they just need a platform or a space in order to do that. We can work with those providers as well, and we have a long series of a track record of partnering with local providers or identifying a specific need within the population that we may not have within our specialization. We can identify those providers and contract with them and make sure that that's integrated into our service model. A very important part of what we do is we know that anecdotally from running over 10,000 units, we know what the stories are, we know what the impact is, we see it on a day-to-day basis. It's oftentimes easy for someone to stand up at a podium like this and tell you how great it is. You don't have to believe me. We measure the impact. We want to keep a track record of what that impact is, how we are impacting these people's lives, how we're affecting these people's lives, what the health outcomes are. And we spend a lot of time measuring that to make sure that we can report that so it isn't just anecdotal and there is hard data behind it. Because this will be the first development that Jamboree has done in Camarillo, there's an introduction period that is going to have to take place, and we really see ourselves playing a proactive part of that. It's a very important part of our strategy. Again, it's something we talk about from the very beginning. When we first met with staff, it was one of the first things that we talked about. We've already been having those conversations as we've gone through this introduction process. We have an entire department that's dedicated to community engagement. Kelsey Brewer, who's our Senior Director of Government Relations, she has a team that involves marketing, it involves education, it involves site visits, it involves really as much introducing ourselves to the community and us getting to know the community as well. We also see our partnership with city staff and with you in order to make that an effective and worthwhile process. But again, it's a matter of us being thoughtful about it, planning it, getting to know who the stakeholders are, making sure we're in a forum where we can make those introductions and listen to feedback as well. We learn as much throughout the community engagement process as the community does. A lot of times people get scared when we talk about affordable housing or homeless housing or permanent supportive housing. That gets scary. So we see it as our job to educate. But at the same time, we want to educate ourselves about what the needs are in the city of Camarillo, what solutions are available here, and then what solutions we can bring to the table as well. Jamboree, the way that we've grown, the way that we've gone from 0 units in 1990 to over 10,000 today is through that city partnership. We don't come into cities and say, hey, we're going to build this and we know what's right. Our process is always community engagement at as many levels as we can to have that conversation and be responsive to what the needs are in the community. And then we bring our expertise to the table to help provide those solutions. So I talked a little bit about this, a regional overview, getting a sense of the community landscape, the education process, which again goes both ways, and then really mobilizing the community to identify supporters among the stakeholders who can help introduce us, who can support us throughout the process and make sure that we're talking to the right people. Again, it continues to be a very important part of what it is that we do. So, as I said, George and Roger and I are here to answer any questions that you may have, but we're grateful for your time and really grateful for the truly diligent, informative process of introduction that we've had through your staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I guess that brings us to questions.
I have a question. Just so I understand this correctly, so when we're looking at the wraparound services or mental health services and services being offered, so do you actually have staff on site or that are there 24 hours, some 24 hours, or what does that look like exactly?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember, and nice to see you all here this evening. Thank you. So the question is, do we have staff members on site who are delivering those services directly
Yes.
to the residents in our communities? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we do. There are two different sets of staff that generally you find at every site. Some are those who are responsible for managing the property. In other words, the leases that all the residents would have at a permanent supportive housing project, which sometimes I get, my responsibility tends to be on the operations side. Michael and Roger do the development side. So I sometimes regret the nomenclature that we find ourselves using, permanent supportive housing. What does that actually mean? What it actually means is these are independent living apartments, and the residents have leases. There are house rules, the same as there are for every other apartment complex in the city. We enforce those rules through our property management staff, who are also on site, along with the services staff, which essentially makes housing supportive, so that a resident who has a need or an issue, we don't pretend that people coming through the coordinated entry system into permanent housing where they have to manage a lease, there are expectations about how they behave in community. It can be challenging, there's no question about it. Not every permanent supportive housing resident is successful, much as not every apartment tenant is successful in their community. But the difference is that we do have those staff who come directly on site, deliver services, and if the resident needs something beyond what we can individually deliver through our capabilities, we reach out, we access those resources. If possible, we bring them to the site, and if that's not possible, we assist the resident in going and accessing those services elsewhere. I'm not
Okay.
sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. And the other piece was, should there be some crisis that happens at times that are not during the business times, do folks have access to that care?
24 hours a day, 7
Okay.
days a week. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Okay. No questions, comments? I'll entertain a motion then.
I have a question, but more a broader question, Mayor Santangelo. I think it's important to gain clarity as to what our homeless population looks like. And to that question, I would like to ask of Chief Tennyson. One of the reasons that I moved to Camarillo and decided to raise my children here was because we do prioritize public safety. And so I just want to, if you can inform our community about, since you've been on the front lines of helping folks through Project Hope, and you handle, this situation well, Can you talk about the demographics and your experiences with this population?
Yes, Councilmember Martinez Bravo. We have a unique population in Camarillo that is very different than populations that we have even as our next-door neighbors in Oxnard, Thousand Oaks, and Ventura. Probably about 70% of our homeless population live out of RVs throughout the city, primarily in a couple of different locations. We have about 20% of our homeless populations that we estimate are actually living on the streets, and then probably 10%, and these are all estimates, but about 10% who live on people's couches, and they move from friend to friend's house. So our population is a little different than what you see elsewhere. In Camarillo, we don't see a lot of encampments in terms of people living in tents and groups of tents. While we do have a couple that pop up occasionally, through Project Hope, we reach out and try and find shelter space for these folks in available shelters throughout the county. If we can't find shelter space, we try and find other means through local nonprofits that will help us get people housing. But our population in Camarillo is very different than it is in other cities, and so some of the problems that we see on TV that are so prominent, with homeless folks being part of violent crime, we don't really see that here in Camarillo like we do other places. Not to say that that can't happen, it's just not what we've seen in the last 3 years that I've been here in Camarillo.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No, thank you. Are there any public comments? I see none. Okay. I'll entertain a motion then.
I will second.
I'll entertain a motion.
Oh, I will. Sorry, Susan. I will go ahead and make a motion to move forward with staff's recommendations.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Let's vote. And that passes 4 and 1 abstention.
Is that considered an abstention, or if he's not present?
That would be reflected as a conflict, so it's not an
Okay.
abstention.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're whole again. That brings us to item M, which is the funding agreement with PVRPD for the summer concert series. Michelle Deanna.
Good evening, Mayor Santangelo and Camarillo City Council members. Summer concerts at Constitution Park have been a longtime Camarillo tradition. The city has relied on the expertise of the Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District to carry out this event, and they have done extremely well for the last few years, from surveying the community to learn what types of bands are in demand, seeking out and contracting with bands and vendors, marketing the event and implementing good neighbor practices, to establishing a community touch point during the concert to engage with community members, and pre and post dialogue with the city to fine-tune the operation. It is accurate to say that the past few years of the city contracting with PVRPD to implement this event have been successful. In 2019, the City Council entered into a multi-year agreement with PVRPD, but staff returned each year for funding requests based on that agreement. So this year, we're seeking to wrap all of that into one funding agreement that outlines both the terms of the agreement and the funding. So this means we are before you this evening seeking approval for the next 3 years with the option of a 2-year time extension. This will make it easier on city staff to budget for the event in coming years, and it will provide a funding commitment to PVRPD so they can plan for future years and have the necessary funds allocated to secure the bands well ahead of concert season. So the overall budget for this event is higher than in previous years for several reasons. The cost of securing the bands has increased over time. Additional budget can bring more popular bands, and the city would be transitioning some of the duties that to PVRPD that the city has traditionally handled. So therefore, we would be providing those funds to PVRPD in order to carry out those tasks. Additionally, the city intends to provide in-kind services in the form of providing the service fee for utility billing inserts, the cost of relocation for the storage container, as well as overtime for sheriff's deputies during the concert to ensure the community's health, safety, and welfare is maintained at all times. We also look forward to using these 4 concerts as community engagement opportunities for the city. Similar to last year, we would plan to host a city booth at each of the concerts to engage with our community members on city initiatives. So we're before you this evening to request an approval of an appropriation of funds and to authorize the city manager to execute a multi-year funding agreement with PVRPD for the summer concert series. This concludes staff's presentation, but I'm certainly available to answer any questions if you have any of me. And we are also joined this evening by General Manager Mary Otten of PVRPD and her team, if you have any questions of them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle. Do we have any questions? Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, and thank you for that presentation. I really appreciate the nexus that we built up with the Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District. We all remember that before we didn't have that, and we weren't sure whether or not we were going to be able to even have them. And thanks to Pleasant Valley Rec and Park and our staff, we were able to make sure that we were able to have this event. Getting to my question, in previous years, they would kind of do an analysis of what type of bands and whatnot that the public wants. Do you know in the next 3 years, if in fact this does get approved, that would be the case as well?
We do have that built into the contract. I know PVRPD has done that in prior years just to kind of take the temperature of the community in terms of what type of music they're expecting to enjoy at these concerts. We do have that built into the agreement, and it would be something that we would communicate with PVRPD on kind of a year-by-year basis.
Yeah, I'd suggest that we do that because I think it's really good to get feedback from the community of, you know, what type of bands and whatnot and music and festivities, because it's a great festival. I look at it as it's a city event here. I mean, I know people look forward. I'm editorializing here. I don't mean to, but people really look forward to this. So that would be my suggestion, that we keep, you know, going out to the public and try to take their temperature, if you will, on that. So, but those are my thoughts and questions.
Yeah, I have some comments as well. I just wanted to know, for the questionnaires that went out, were they ever provided in any other language other than English? And if they were not, are there any thoughts to do so moving forward? Because I totally agree with Councilmember Kildee. I think getting the feedback from the community is important, and I think it's important to provide that information in as many languages as possible. In addition, you know, to look at the different ways that different groups may receive information, whether it may be by radio or, you know, more newspaper or email, or, you know, how is the PVRPD going through that process?
I do not recall what happened in the past, but PVRPD is here if you'd like to ask
Sure.
that of them. But certainly moving forward, that would be something we would consider.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mary Otten, General Manager, Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District. So to answer your question, we have done multiple, and I'm going to have Caitlin kind of speak here in just a second. So yes to all of that. We have done surveys in the past. I can tell you the first survey that we did in 2019, I think we had probably 10 or 15 different genres, all the way from rock to country to orchestras to, I mean, we did the entire gamut. So what we've typically done is taken the top 4 that get the most votes, and those are the ones that we use. So we'll use those as the guide, and then it all depends on who we can find and what bands. So over the past, since we've been doing this since 2019, I think we've only had 2 bands the same twice. One was a requested Twisted Gypsy, which is a local, and then I think the other one, we've done Elvis. But other than that, we've really tried to look at various genres, as well as continue to do surveys. So with the surveys, we can, We don't have the staff capacity if we need to do a second language. We just don't have that. If that is something the council wishes to do and wants to put more money in to be able to do that, we'd be happy to look at that and expand that as an opportunity. I can tell you that typically what we do is we put stuff in our activity guide. We've done stuff through Facebook. We've worked with the city to do their Facebook posts. We've had them at our senior center, had them at our aquatic center. So we don't just do one avenue. We do try and look at multiple avenues to do that. I think one of the challenges that we have is that we typically will start making those requests. So concert series happen in the summer. They end in usually September. We start asking for requests the next year, starting in about November, because when you look at the planning of it, typically we're done and have to pick bands by February. So people tend to forget, or it's not necessarily on their mind. So one of the things we've talked about this year is actually having it at the concerts, and then that way we can get input at that point in time. So we're open to other suggestions, but do know that we do reach out to the community. Have I missed any ones right now, Caitlin, that we've done? But that's kind of the breadth right now.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Mary. If I could just make one suggestion and avenue to explore is maybe working with the school district. I know in a previous board position I had, the school district was absolutely phenomenal at giving this information to students, and a lot of it would then end up at home. That way you're hitting a broader cross-section of the community. Just a thought.
Sure.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, open for comments or a motion?
I'll start it off if you'd like. Yeah, I support this. Again, you know, if you look back on the history of this, we weren't sure that we were going to be able to go forward with this, but then the Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District and the city kind of got together, and I'm going to editorialize a little bit. I think it's been really, really great for the city and the Rec and Park, too, to collaborate on this. It's a collaborative effort here. In all my years on the council, one of the really good things and feedbacks that I've had is how they really love the concerts at the park. And I also want to acknowledge that the previous regime that, I'll call them a regime that promoted this and did all the work, did a great job, and they really established a great boundary and a stepping stone for us to move forward with this. So it's a little more money than what it used to be, but I think that the importance of giving back to the community and allowing the community to share in the arts, and this is part of the arts here that we support in the city. I think it's really important to go forward with this, and I look forward to attending them for the next 3 years here. It's the best price in town. It's amazing what we can do and not be able to charge for this. So a lot of work on a lot of people's work schedule, but I think it's really meaningful. So when it's permissive, I'd like to make the recommendation. Unless there's other comments, I certainly will listen to other comments as well.
Other comments?
Just real quick. I'm very supportive of the item. I'm very appreciative of the collaboration between the district and the city, and I'm very appreciative of all of the district's efforts on this. They do a wonderful job. So, that's it.
With that, I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to add my comment that this has been a real partnership with PVRPD, and the city can't do the work. You do the work, and we appreciate that. The concerts are some of my most favorite times, and I think they're really important to the city, so thank you.
I'll move approval of suggested action.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Okay. So we're at the, I keep doing that. We're at the 6 o'clock point, so this is the time when we would take public comment. And we have no public comment, so that was fast, and then we'll get back to our agenda. Which brings us to item N, which is transit operations and maintenance services agreement amendment.
Yes, Mayor and Council, can I again, Councilmember Kildee, related to the trolley aspect of this contract, also has a conflict, so he will step down for this item. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Santangelo and council members. I'm Sean Cruz, Public Works Administrator, and tonight I'll provide a brief overview of the city's public transit services, the evolution of the current agreement with RATP, and the proposed amendment that is before you tonight. The city's transit program, Camarillo Area Transit, or CAT, is operated through a contract currently with RATP Dev USA, LLC, doing business as Roadrunner Shuttle. The city provides a few different transit services. We have our fixed route, which currently connects Leisure Village to various locations within Camarillo, and the trolley route, which connects the Metrolink station to the Camarillo Town Center, the outlets, and Old Town. The city also offers demand response services, which provides origin to destination public transit service, where a transit vehicle will come to your home or address in Camarillo and transport you to where you need to go. Local dial-a-ride service is available to the general public, as well as individuals with Americans with Disabilities Act card and seniors age 65 and older. The city also offers regional dial-a-ride for ADA and senior residents, enabling them to travel as far east as cities of Simi Valley and Thousand Oaks. And we also have a transfer point in Oxnard to connect to Gold Coast Transit for West County service. This slide provides CAT ridership statistics pre- and post-pandemic. Fiscal year 18-19 was the last full fiscal year where ridership was not impacted by COVID. At that time, the city had a ridership of 174,432 passengers and 33,605 revenue hours of service were provided. Vehicle revenue hours are the hours of service where the city's contractor can bill for service and generally includes the time period that the vehicle is in service for the public. Approximately 56% of ridership was from demand response service, with the remaining 44% being fixed route trolley services. Fast forward to fiscal year 21-22, our most current complete fiscal year, and our ridership was at 67,482 trips and 19,700 vehicle revenue hours, or a 61% decrease and 41% decrease respectively. With 7 months of data for the current fiscal year, these decreased ridership trends continue. On March 11th, 2020, just before the City Council's declaration of a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the City Council authorized Agreement 2020-31 for transit operations and maintenance, which was set to take effect April 1st, 2020. The agreement award occurred after the completion of a request for proposal process, of which RATP was the incumbent awardee. The RFP and resulting prices were based off of ridership and revenue hour statistics that were in line with the fiscal year 18-19 data presented in the previous slide. The cost of RATP's first year of service was originally proposed at $67.65 per revenue hour. RATP's contract is to provide management and administration personnel, bus drivers, maintenance mechanics, maintenance facilities and equipment, secured vehicle storage, and related resources to operate the CAT fleet of transit vehicles. The city provides the fleet of vehicles currently at 18. Just before the new agreement was to take place, due to COVID-19, City Council suspended the trolley route and general purpose dial-a-ride services at the beginning of the contract, impacting the ability of RATP to receive enough revenue to cover their fixed cost. On May 13th, 2020, RATP requested COVID-19 relief due to significant lost revenues. The agreement has been amended 4 times in total, with the most recent amendment being agreement number 2020-31D. Now, the first 3 amendments established a process for RATP to submit for payment of the difference between the monthly cost of providing continued transit operations and the billable revenue for the same month. The fourth and most recent amendment restructured the payment structure with a tiered variable rate based on the percentage of vehicle revenue hours when compared to the 18-19 average vehicle revenue hours for the same billed month. And then just this last bullet point was just noting that for a few years, we did have CARES and ARPA funding that helped to essentially cover 100% of our public transit services, but we have spent all of those funds at the end of the last fiscal year. As part of this first one-year renewal extension, RITP has proposed continuing the tiered rate structure as established with the most recent amendment. The proposed vehicle revenue hour rates have a proposed average increase of 8.3% over this current fiscal year. RITP has needed to increase driver wages in order to continue to ensure that drivers remain available to provide services, which is a common struggle within the public transit service sector, including other transit agencies here in Ventura County. The proposed amendment also includes increased insurance requirements, which are a reflection of guidance from our California Joint Powers Insurance Authority. As the amendment extends the term of agreement an additional 3 months from March 31st, 2024 to June 30th, 2024, for a total of 15 months, RITP has requested to have the rate increase be retroactive to January 1st, 2023. This will enable RITP to catch up to revenue that it would lose by not being able to propose a rate adjustment for the April 1st through June 30th of 2024 time period. Other factors that impact the city's cost are the age of the city's transit fleet. 79% of the current CAT fleet meets or exceeds its full benchmark as established by the Federal Transit Administration. The aged vehicles have increased RITP's monthly maintenance cost above originally anticipated cost. Staff is currently working on a vehicle replacement plan. However, supply chain and overall vehicle order demands will likely mean that it will take time before a sufficient number of the city's fleets can be replaced. Additionally, the Ventura County Transportation Commission, or VCTC, is nearing completion of its transit integration and efficiency study, of which Camarillo has been participating as a transit operator. The study could have future impacts on how CAT operates, depending on the extent of TIE's recommendations approved by VCTC. The amendment as proposed has a total not to exceed amount of $3,999,000. Staff's recommendation is to authorize the city manager to execute Agreement 2020-31E with RITP Dev for rate increase and continue the payment method to account for variable demand for CAT services. This concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Do we have questions? Is there any public comment? I'm losing my voice. Okay, we have no public comments. Okay.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes 4-0. 4-1? No, 4-0 with one.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, could I just express my appreciation to staff for all the hard work on this item? Thank you.
Okay. And that brings us down to item O, which is the resolution authorizing the early payment of 1.5-year of debt service for water revenue bonds.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Mark Uribe, the Finance Director for the city, and this item is to authorize early payment of water bond debt service through next fiscal year, 23-24. With debt issuances, there is typically a covenant that requires a debt service coverage ratio to be maintained. With the city's 2019 water bonds, that required coverage is 125%. or 1.25 times. And that means operating revenues must exceed operating expenses by 1.25 times the annual debt service on the bonds. So as an example, if the annual debt service is $1 million, the operating revenues must exceed the operating expenditures by $250,000. Thank you. Almost. What this does is it provides investors and rating agencies with the assurance that the bonds will be paid on time. Our coverage ratio had been over 200% in previous years, but last fiscal year, with the extreme water conservation measures brought on by the drought, the one-day-a-week watering, it reduced the operating revenues substantially. And that fact, coupled with the increased costs, operating costs of the water system, caused the coverage ratio to dip below the requirement. Now, staff has been working with the city's team of bond consultants to determine the most appropriate method to demonstrate to bondholders and rating agencies that the city's water system will be able to make the annual debt service payments. The recommended approach is to set aside funds equal to the debt service payments due the remainder of this fiscal year and for all of next fiscal year, and effectively prepaying the debt service for 2 years, and including an informational statement in the annual required bond disclosure document that explains the situation. That annual bond disclosure is due March 31st. But we've drafted an explanation of what's going on for the bondholders and rating agencies. Not a requirement, but it's something that, in talking with bond consultants, it's something that we feel is the right thing to do. The prepayment of approximately $1.8 million will come from the water system's reserves. And the recommended action is to approve a resolution authorizing the transfer of funds, and that completes my report. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any questions?
Oh, wrong button.
Yes.
I have a question, Mark, and thank you very much for your presentation. So what, you talked about the debt service coverage ratio. I imagine that we're not the only city that, since we're all going through a drought, and I'm just wondering, do you know what other cities are doing or how they are handling this situation?
I don't. We did not poll other cities, but I do agree with your point that this is not something that is unique to Camarillo.
Sure.
I'm sure that other water providers that have bond out there would have a similar debt service coverage ratio requirement that they would likely have been unable to meet with the decrease in revenues.
Okay. And my other question as a follow-up is, what would be the impact of not having this, and I'm not sure on the term, but a healthy debt service ratio?
It could potentially result in a bond rating downgrade. We currently have our water bonds at the highest rating. I think it's either AA or AAA, but the highest rating that is available is where we stand right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Yeah, and Mark, the funds are available in this account that we're going to draw from?
Correct.
Okay.
Once we do the transfer, we have enough funds in reserves to make this transfer of funds to set aside or prepay the debt service.
Okay. That's all I have.
Do we have any public comment on this item? No. Okay. Comments? Or I'll entertain a motion.
Move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Give it to Mark.
You have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that also passes unanimously. Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank
Have the
you.
next item.
Oh, well, then please stay there. That brings us to item P, which is the fiscal year 23-24 preliminary budget review.
Thank you. Hello again, council members. The preliminary budget is presented tonight, a brief presentation.
I need to reconvene the Camarillo Sanitary District to order, please.
Now you're on.
Thank you. We're in the early stages of budget development for next fiscal year, 23-24, which begins on July 1st. This preliminary budget review will focus on the general fund revenues. The city's general fund being the largest fund where the majority of discretionary revenues and general municipal services are recorded. There will be a much more detailed budget workshop in May. At the mid-year budget review last month, we talked about inflation and how multiple interest rate increases by the Federal Reserve were beginning to slow the rate of inflation. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, is a standard measure of inflation that's expressed as a percentage increase or decrease from the previous period. And the January CPI, the most recent, was a 5.6% increase over January of last year. And that's down from the annual increase of 7.6% for the entire calendar year of 2022. So all that to say, the inflation seems to be slowing down. The consensus economic forecasts predict continued slowing of the economy, and that's been factored into our general fund revenue projections. So on the next slide, this is a chart that shows the major categories of the general fund revenue. We show the revenue sources, the prior fiscal year 2022 actual revenues, the current year 2023 budget, and then in that blue shaded header, the preliminary budget estimates or projections for fiscal year 2024. Sales tax and property tax are the largest revenue sources, making up close to 70% of the total revenue for the general fund. That first line there, sales tax, had a significant growth during the post-pandemic recovery. We're now approximately 24% higher than the pre-pandemic peak revenue. Working with consultants to review trends and economic forecasts, we're projecting a modest 2% increase for next fiscal year. Again, reflecting the consensus that the rapid growth we've experienced over the last 2 years is going to start to slow significantly and get us back to, quotes, normal growth rates. On the property tax line, that is the one revenue that did not take a measurable hit during the pandemic. If anything, the very active housing market that followed drove property values considerably higher, and that translates to higher property tax revenues. We're now 13% above the pre-pandemic peak, and at this point, looking at trends, the cooling market, we're forecasting, again, a back to normal growth rate of 3%. On the next line, franchise fees, those have been fairly steady. That current year budget, let's see if my pointer works, that 2.8 million, it's a little bit of a decrease from the 2.9 in prior year. We actually expect it's going to come in a little bit higher than that 2.8, and the projection for next year, 2.9, rather than that 4.8%. If we adjust the current year to where we think we're going to land, it's closer to a 3% growth rate year over year. More in line, again, with historical growth rates. The transient occupancy tax, we refer to as TOT, it's also known as hotel tax or bed tax, experienced some very strong growth over the last 2 years due to pent-up demand, pent-up travel demand, and coupled with increased room rates. And these revenues are currently at 24% higher than the pre-pandemic peak. For next fiscal year, the forecast reflects a back to normal growth rate of approximately 2%. Under building permits, those saw a quick rebound the year after the pandemic and have had steady growth since. This revenue is dependent on building activity and can fluctuate. The projection for next fiscal year, is a 26.7% increase. That is due to a couple of fairly large projects that are in the pipeline expected to happen next year. On the next line, business taxes, those have been fairly steady as well. There was a slight dip during the pandemic as some businesses closed during that time, but it's recovered and now they're currently 2% higher than pre-pandemic peak levels. And it's forecasted to have a 4.6% increase next fiscal year. The charges for services line are development-related projects that generate revenues, and they fluctuate based on development activity. 2 large projects with one-time revenues came in this fiscal year, and that explains this big jump from the 2.1 last year to the 3.3 this year. So getting back, eliminating those 2 projects, we get back to about a $2 million level. It shows as a 37.7% decrease, but if you were to take that out, factor out those 2 large revenues, we'd be closer to normal levels of revenue at that category. The other revenue sources line down here, expected to go up 12.7%. What's included in these other revenue sources is interest income, and that is what's driving the increase, because the past couple of years, the interest rates have been down, but as they're starting to rise, we're seeing much more revenue coming in interest earnings. And that brings us to a bottom line of $56.5 million, an overall 1.5% increase. But keep in mind that if you back out these large one-time revenues, bring it down, this would be closer to about a 3.5% overall increase, if you wanted to try and say apples to apples, excluding those large one-time revenues that came in this year. So that concludes the brief presentation on the preliminary budget revenues for the general fund. The suggested action is to provide feedback and then receive and file the report. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mark, again. Do we have questions? Mr. Tremblay.
Mark, on the charges for services, refresh my recollection, what were the two large projects that came in this year?
Lennar and Williams Homes.
Okay. All right. But then conversely, you expect building permit revenues to increase
Correct.
next year.
For next fiscal year.
But not charges for services.
No.
I'm trying to relate those two together.
Sure. I think
they're mutually exclusive, but you're going to educate me.
I'm going to try. They are different projects and different timing of when these revenues come in between the building permits and the other charges for services, things like engineering fees, subdivision fees, more once the development gets going, whereas the building permits are in the front end.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Kildee?
Yeah, Mark, for instance, like if there's some monies that might come to us through, let's say, the passage of that infrastructure bill, will that affect our budget in any way? I know we received some, and there is potentially some more money out there that we may or may not receive. Will that affect, in essence, the way that we calculate that?
I think I'll answer the question this way. From what I understand, the question is if any new revenue sources come in, how would that impact our budget? It would depend if it was an infrastructure bill that came through. If it was one-time funding, we would generally try and account for that as a one-time source of revenue and try and apply that to one-time projects or expenditures. What we looked at on this previous slide are primarily operating revenues. So in general, we make sure we balance operationally. Balance meaning operating revenues are equal to or exceeding the operating expenditures.
Thank you.
Questions? Any comments? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to file and receive.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Okay.
Would you like me to get the same thing on the CAMSAN
Yes,
district at this
I would.
point? Okay. I'll need a motion to receive and file for CAMSAN as well.
I'll second.
Okay, there's
And
a
I'll
motion,
second.
And there is a second. Hearing no other discussion, please vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us down to our public hearing, which is a fiscal year 23-24 CDBG preliminary allocations.
Good evening. I'm James Fowler, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department, and I have the pleasure of introducing our CDBG consultant, Aaron Lay of Veronica Tam and Associates.
Good evening, Council. I won't repeat my introduction. I've been working with the city staff on that same thing. I've been working with the city staff on developing the 2023-2024 annual action plan for community development block grants. And the item before you tonight is the consideration of the preliminary CDBG funding allocations for 23-24 funding year. I guess I'm in charge of my own things here. Excuse me. There we go, sorry. CDBG program has been around since 1974. It's administered by HUD. It provides annual formula-based grants to do three things in the community: directly benefit low and moderate income persons, preventing and eliminating slums and blight, or addressing urgent community needs. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Oh, aim it at the table. There we go. Whoops, now we've gone too far. Okay, thank you. The city is required to submit a number of documents every year in order to receive their CDBG funds, as you see them listed here. The document currently being developed is the annual action plan, which must be submitted to HUD by May 17th. I do want to take a moment here to tell you that the agenda report that you received had funds that were estimated based on last year's allocation because the allocation hadn't yet been released by HUD. It has since been released. What I'm going to be presenting to you now are based on the actual allocations, and then at the end I'll show you a little bit of a comparison between what you saw in your agenda report and what we're seeing now. So CDBG allows a number of different activities to take place, and you have to first determine exactly how much money you're going to have for the year. The actual allocation that you are going to be getting is $332,793 in entitlement funds. That's for 22-23. You also, 23-24. You also have unallocated prior year funds of just over $143,000 and some anticipated program income of $25,000, which brings your allocation, your amount that you have to allocate, to just over $500,000. HUD has certain limits on how you can spend these funds. Up to 15% can be used for public services. Those can be thought of as social services or human services. About 20% can be used for admin, and that includes fair housing, so those two numbers together equal the 20% of your allocation. The remaining 65% has to be used for bricks and mortar projects, which the city typically uses in housing type of programs. The city reaches out every year through the Notice of Funding Allocations, funding availability to the local nonprofit community so that they can help in carrying out CDBG eligible activities. In December, 2 informational meetings were held to inform those local agencies about the availability of funds. 7 agencies submitted applications, and all are being recommended for funding tonight. 6 of the applications were for services that fall under the Public Services 15% cap, and they are shown here. In addition, Habitat for Humanity applied to do a Habitat home repair owner-occupied rehabilitation program. They're being recommended for $50,000 funding. City staff also recommend that certain city programs be funded, including the Affordable Housing Acquisition Program, the Fair Housing Services through an agreement with the Ventura County Consortium, and the administration of the program. The timeline has been moving forward for a little while. We've gotten a few things completed, and there are more things that have to be completed yet. The next action is going to be a 30-day public comment period, followed by another public hearing before the City Council to forecast for April 12th to ask for an approval of the submission of the 23-24 action plan. These next 3 slides are designed to show you the difference between what you originally saw in your agenda packet and what we're presenting to you this evening. The changes here in the amounts that are allowable in these different areas that HUD allows. The changes here in those public services programs that we talked about. And the changes here in the bricks and mortar projects and the administration projects, Habitat for Humanity, Affordable Housing Acquisition, and Fair Housing and Administration.
So in summation, it's going to be, or suggested action is to adopt a revised resolution. So rather than the resolution that you received in your agenda packet, a revised resolution approving the CDBG preliminary funding allocations for inclusion in the draft fiscal year 2023 to 2024 CDBG action plan. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you both. Do we have any questions? Mr. Kildee?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I, get my numbers right. The entitlement allocation is actually going to be down a little bit, but the unallocated is actually going to be up. Is that fairly typical? Does that happen? Because I've been doing this a while and I can't recall whether or not, it's been a while since I've seen that happen. Am I correct on that?
It's really not, there's really no such thing as typical in these kinds of situations. It is a little unusual that you've got less this year, though many grantees got less this year than in past years. The function of how much is unallocated from prior years has a lot to do with how your nonprofits did in spending their money and how other programs did. So to have a lot of money left over on the heels of COVID, where everybody was really having a hard time getting services done, is not a surprise.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, this is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. Would anybody like to make a public comment? Okay, I see nobody coming forward, so I will close the public hearing. And we are open for comments or a motion.
I'll move to adopt the revised resolution.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. So that brings us to the end of our open session, but we are still continuing in closed session. So at this time, we will recess back into closed session.